They say timing is everything. I should have known mine was off the moment. Darren smiled too easily. It was a Monday morning, too early for false optimism, but there it was, plastered across his face like a politician before election week. I had rehearsed my points all weekend. Revenue growth, client retention, the cross-border system I had architected, the 6-country rollout, 5 years of work that turned a clunky regional workflow into a global KPI powerhouse. And last quarter, that system helped us secure a $60 million deal. A raise wasn't a reward. It was overdue recognition. Darren had only been CEO for 3 weeks. He came in with that classic outsider energy, clean suits, sharper buzzwords, no real grasp of the legacy systems. But I gave him the benefit of the doubt. I had no reason not to, not yet. "Thanks for coming in, Tina," he said, gesturing to the seat across from him. His office was still bare, no pictures, no personal items, just a laptop, a whiteboard, and an untouched succulent wilting in the corner. I got straight to the point. I wanted to talk compensations, specifically adjusting my salary to reflect the expanded scope I'd been managing. He nodded slowly, almost too slowly. "I've reviewed your file," he began. "Your contributions are impressive, especially with the KPI system. But we're in the middle of a major organizational review. Until the structure settles, we're freezing all compensation discussions. It's not about you, it's about timing." There it was again. Timing. I kept my expression steady. "So no adjustments this quarter?" "Not yet," he replied. "Let's revisit after the realignment." He stood up, signaling the end of the meeting. Before I could say anything else, as I stepped into the hallway, my phone buzzed with an alert: Team Sync updated workflow vision. Curious, I stopped by the glass board outside the analytics war room. A new KPI architecture was drawn out, detailed, color-coded, freshly labeled. The core structure was mine, every diagram, every metric path. Except my name wasn't anywhere. Jason's was, and that was the first time I realized this wasn't just about timing. This was the start of something else entirely. The calendar invite came at 6:12 in the morning, titled simply, Realignment. 10:30 in the morning. Darren's office. No agenda, no context, just 15 minutes blocked off, squeezed between 2 of his finance meetings. I stared at it for a moment, my heart skipping in that familiar, instinctive way when something feels wrong before your brain catches up. I arrived at 10:28 in the morning. Darren didn't look up from his laptop when I knocked. "Come in," he said, eyes still on the screen. There was no coffee offered this time. No handshake. Just a sterile room and silence so thick I had to force my breath to stay even. He finally glanced up, closed his laptop with a snap, and folded his hands. "Tina, I'll get straight to it. As part of the organizational restructuring, we're shifting leadership responsibilities in the systems division." My stomach dropped, but I kept my face still. "Effective immediately, you'll be stepping into a senior analyst role, advisory capacity. You'll retain your salary and benefits, but moving forward, you'll report to Jason, who will lead the global KPI initiative." Jason, I blinked. The Jason who just last month asked me what predictive load balancing meant. The same Jason who once crashed the sandbox server running a test model because he forgot to cap the input. I opened my mouth, then closed it again. Darren continued, as if reading from a script. "This isn't about performance. It's a strategic decision. Jason represents a new leadership profile, a fresh perspective, growth focus. We value your experience, but we also need alignment with where we're heading." I nodded slowly, my throat tightening. "And what exactly is my role in this advisory capacity?" "Think of it as a mentoring position," he said. "You'll guide the team, provide legacy knowledge, but from a non-decision-making standpoint." Non-decision-making. It felt like being surgically removed from my own brainchild and handed a guest pass to the operating room. The meeting ended 3 minutes later. No room for questions. Just polite phrases like, "Thanks for your understanding and we're counting on your support during this transition." As I walked back to my desk, the office buzzed around me like nothing had happened. I sat down, opened my inbox, and there it was, a company-wide announcement. Exciting news: Jason Miller appointed as lead strategist, Global KPI Initiative. His photo was attached, smiling, confident, in a suit he probably bought last week. My name wasn't mentioned. I stared at the screen, the words blurring. 5 years. Hundreds of nights. And every line of code I'd written now filtered through someone else's title. Shock held me still, But somewhere beneath it, deeper than the herd, a different feeling stirred. Something sharper, not anger, awareness. This wasn't a realignment. It was a quiet eraser. The company-wide meeting started at 9:15 in the morning. I sat in the middle row of the auditorium, third seat from the left, close enough to be seen, far enough to disappear. Darren stood center stage, holding the mic with that same polished charisma he'd worn since day one. The screen behind him displayed a looping animation of rising graphs, contract logos, and the bold white title, Q2, Strategic Vision, Scaling Smarter. His voice echoed with confidence. Before we dive in, I want to recognize someone who's been instrumental in transforming our KPI infrastructure, a system that's now at the core of our $60 million global expansion. For a split second, my breath caught. Some small, stubborn part of me still hoped, maybe, just maybe, he would do the right thing. Let's give it up for Jason Miller, our new lead strategist. Applause exploded across the room. Jason stood near the aisle, grinning, adjusting his blazer as he walked to the stage like it was always meant to be his. I sat frozen. No one even looked in my direction. Darren continued. Jason spearheaded our new metrics logic, simplified the performance tracking layers, and drove a culture of proactive analytics that's unmatched in the market. I stared at the slideshow behind them. My slides. My framework. I knew every line of those charts, every color-coded index and data weight formula. I had built them in silence, nights and weekends, through testing errors, client feedback loops, and long meetings with compliance. And now they were Jason's legacy. The clapping died down. Darren motioned to the next slide. A heat rose behind my ears when I noticed the file name in the corner of the screen. Tina_KPI_arch_final.ptx. They hadn't even bothered to change the file name. I sat there, hands folded, nodding slightly as if I were a guest at someone else's party. Around me, coworkers whispered about Jason's brilliance and how fast he turned things around. My badge felt heavier than usual around my neck, like a name tag for a person who no longer existed. Later that day, around 1:50 in the afternoon, an internal email hit my inbox. Subject line, "Congratulations, Jason." I opened it. The header image was a custom banner featuring one of my original dashboard layouts, cropped, but still unmistakably mine. No one noticed. Or maybe no one cared. I stepped away from my desk, locked myself in an empty conference room, and sat, with the lights off. There was no screaming, no tears. Just a silence so loud it pulsed in my ears. The erasure wasn't just happening behind closed doors anymore. Now it was lit up on a screen, framed by applause. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't storm into Darren's office demanding answers. I didn't even reply to the email. I did what people like him never see coming. I stayed quiet. But beneath that silence, my mind was sharpening like a blade. By 7:15 in the morning the next day, I was at my desk with a fresh cup of coffee and a new focus: the system. My system. I opened the back-end architecture, dug into the core layers, and traced the data flows from server to dashboard. Jason had begun implementing changes already. Surface-level tweaks to naming conventions, cosmetic layout edits, but the foundation was untouched. They hadn't dared alter the bones, probably because they didn't know how. What they also didn't know was that I had embedded microstructures throughout the system, tiny patches of logic meant to stabilize the load balancer, recalibrate lag time, or auto-clean redundant entries. Those structures weren't in the documentation. I had written them in the early days. Before we even had a compliance lead, they were invisible to anyone who hadn't lived inside the system like I had. And they were about to make all the difference. As I worked, I kept my headphones in, face unreadable. Colleagues passed by my desk like I wasn't there. I smiled, nodded, but behind my screen, line by line, I was reacquainting myself with every decision I'd ever made. And that's when I saw it. Buried deep in the core logic module, the engine that supported everything: the predictive model, the KPI, the risk forecast simulator. It was all still running on NeutraFrame, a proprietary framework I'd licensed privately 3 years ago when the team's budget request had been denied. Back then, I had bought the license using my own funds. I needed stability and couldn't wait for red tape. No one had ever updated it. No one had ever replaced it. I opened the license panel. Owner Tina Reyes. License type: Developer Enterprise. Status: Active. Auto-renews, March 2026. I sat back in my chair, That framework wasn't owned by the company. It was tied to my name, my credit card, my signature. They had demoted me, erased me from the conversation, but they were still running their entire $60 million operation on a skeleton that belonged to me. I didn't say a word. Not that day. Not the next. No dramatic confrontation. No threats, just quiet revisions, shifting, isolating, preparing. Because, if they thought I was out of power, they were only looking at the surface. And surface never told the full story. The real systems always run beneath it. By 8:20 in the morning, I was already in the system, headphones on, eyes steady, breath quiet. They thought I was just moving on. Jason had taken my seat. Darren had moved on to his next boardroom performance. HR had already reassigned my responsibilities into tidy bullet points. No one suspected a thing. Perfect, I wasn't angry anymore. That kind of heat is messy, unpredictable. What I felt now was cooler, surgical, precise. I knew every bone of the system, every nerve ending, and I knew exactly how to make it sing a tune so sweet no one would notice the underlying rot until it was far too late. I started with the KPI weighting algorithm. Originally, I designed it to reward balanced client satisfaction, retention rate, lead conversion accuracy, healthy signals, honest growth. But under Jason's new management style, volume was king. So I leaned into it. On the surface, I rewrote the logic to inflate short-term data spikes, click volumes, report generation counts, API activity bursts. The numbers would now look phenomenal, but they'd be hollow, like cotton candy. At a distance, colorful, full, and mostly air. Then I turned to the forecasting engine. The original model had been robust, pulling from 7 variables, including vendor response lag, seasonal purchasing trends, logistics traffic, and failure rates. I stripped it down for variables and I introduced a slight bias in the demand curve algorithm. Subtle enough that predictions still looked right, but were actually misaligned by 7 to 12%. Not a cliff, just enough drift to cause quiet chaos. 2 or 3 cycles later, they wouldn't even notice the difference. Next was the alert suppression. Our alert system used to be the crown jewel: smart, dynamic, responsive. It flagged anomalies before humans even noticed patterns forming. But not anymore. I disabled 3 major early warning layers, removed their triggers, replaced them with polite review pending delays. Now the system would remain calm while burning from within. Beautiful. Dangerous. By 11:40 in the morning, I was in the quarterly metrics call. Jason stood at the front of the room, walking everyone through the updated dashboard. The screen glowed, with color-coded bars, green across the board: uptime, client engagement, sales velocity. It all looked perfect. Too perfect. Darren leaned back, arms folded behind his head, smiling like a man who believed he'd just won something. "This is what I'm talking about," he laughed. "We turned that clunky legacy mess into a high-precision profit engine." Number 1 noticed my smile in the back row. It wasn't pride. It wasn't bitterness. It was restraint. Let them believe they'd perfected the machine. Let the green lights lull them deeper into delusion. I wasn't sabotaging. I was observing, monitoring every variance they ignored, every metric they warped, every crack they mistook for polish, because when it all came undone, and it would, I wouldn't need to raise my voice. I'd just let the data speak for itself. By 9:30 in the morning, the glass conference room was already full. People shifted in their seats, coffee in hand, murmuring with excitement. On the screen, a sleek deck of quarterly results, animated graphs dancing with green arrows and rising lines. I sat near the end of the table, silent, invisible. Jason stood at the front, confident, over-rehearsed. He wore a navy blue blazer that still had faint fold lines from the department store rack. He cleared his throat. "Let's start with the forecast accuracy," he said, clicking to a slide titled Precision at Scale. On the screen, a bright green banner read, 98.6% forecast reliability. The room responded with a collective nod of approval. Darren smiled, arms folded behind his back like a proud professor. Investors beamed. I stared at the slide, and I felt my jaw tighten. That number was a lie. Not a rounding error. Not a slight mistake. An engineered illusion. The last model I'd simulated before stepping back had already shown a projected drift of 12%. And that was before Jason's simplifications. He didn't even seem to understand the risk factors he was ignoring, or worse, he knew and didn't care. "Our client delivery timelines have improved by 14%, he added, clicking forward. Stockouts have dropped to an all-time low. We're ahead of the market curve by 3 months. The truth. Deliveries were improving only because the alert system had been silenced. They weren't seeing the missed shipments, the delays, the mismatched invoices, because no one was listening. And stockouts. The calculation had been altered to delay recognition until 2 cycles later. It was like disabling a smoke detector and then celebrating that nothing ever caught fire. I looked around the room. Every face was nodding, approving. Darren leaned in. Jason, these are some of the best performance metrics we've ever seen. Applause followed. Smiles, eye contact, affirmation. And I sat there, stone-faced. They were clapping for something I had built and quietly dismantled. They were praising a version of the system that no longer existed, running on algorithms designed to deceive, dressed up in the language of progress. But I said nothing. Because the longer the illusion held, the deeper the eventual fracture. And I wasn't going to stop it. I was going to document it.